Hello and welcome to this special presentation for the London Transport Museum Friends, which is being recorded and will eventually be broadcast on YouTube. I'm Barry Lejeune, the Friends Chief Executive. The subject of the presentation today is a further update from Museum Director Sam Mullins on the museum plans on what it calls its route to recovery, which sees restarting of some of its programmes and hopefully before too long the reopening of the doors at Covent Garden. Before I ask Sam to make his presentation, I should make the point that this session is being recorded on the 28th of July. Obviously, everything you hear is current at that date, but if you are watching at a later stage on YouTube, just bear in mind that we here are talking on 28th of July and reflecting the position as it is then. After Sam's presentation, there'll be a brief question and answer session involving other members of the Friends management team. Sam, thank you very much for agreeing to give us this further update, and over to you.
Okay, Barry, thanks. I'm going to share the presentation screen. Everyone got that? Look, it's really good to have the opportunity to talk to our friends group and wider supporters today. It is exciting to be at last in a position to be talking about when we start doing things again. The last 3 or 4 months has felt like one of those, walks you do up hills where there's always another horizon. Just when you think you've kind of got to the top, you find the next summit is just ahead of you. But we have now got proposals for, all being well, opening both at Acton and at Covent Garden. And that's what I'm going to just run through with you this afternoon. A little bit of just bringing you up to date with the sort of thinking behind that and where we've been during the pandemic. And then we'll talk about what we call the routes to recovery, which is the way back to reopening again. Where have we been for the last, since the 18th of March was the day we closed down our operations. We've maximised our return from the government's furloughing scheme. That's been a real lifesaver for us. And those of us still at work, a small team of about 30 out of 200 who were working for us in March, have been working on trying to find a sustainable business model for the museum, doing a lot of work with our supporters, trying to take the museum online, completing a few key projects, a new web shop, it went live last week, new website next month or September, finishing off some galleries, and just kind of putting the whole organization really onto care and maintenance. So I'll kind of just walk you through a bit of that, and then we'll talk about the routes to recovery. We kept the museum alive largely online. So we've done work across all our different social media strands. We've put objects online, put vehicles out. We've participated in things like the curator battle, where our killer entry was the three-decker, was it a four-decker, double-decker, a quadruple decker bus. We've put our thought leadership program, Interchange, online with our corporate members. So we've kind of worked it quite hard and kept a real eye on what's being out there in terms of social media. But the one that kind of took a number of our fancies was the tweet in the middle of the page here from Abby Tomlinson, who rather disparaged London men who say, I know a place, and then they take you to the London Transport Museum. Well, I think that would be a perfect place for a first date for me. So when we do some lates in our recovery program, we're going to invite Abby Tomlinson to come into the museum. I guess one of our kind of most high profile programs up to lockdown was the Hidden London tour program. It was scheduled to sell in excess of 40,000 tickets this year and earn us £500,000. So it's a really important part of sustaining the organisation and its charitable mission. We moved very quickly during lockdown and created series of very simple Zoom-based conversations called Hidden London Hangouts. First series of 11 has had just short of 30,000 views from a cold start, which we were really pleased with. And I think it's kind of shown the way forward a bit for us in terms of making better use of digital content. And we've got quite a lot of other, what you might describe as kind of lo-fi activities coming in behind that. And I'll be involving some of the friends, I hope, in some of those online conversations. We're just looking at adapting the Hidden London tour program. And in fact, there are two, what we describe as premier online tours, Brompton Road and King William Street, which sold out in 3 hours yesterday morning for this week. So we're hoping that will be a way forward for us. And we're also developing an above ground tour in Covent Garden with suitable social distancing and so forth. And we're having a look at what we can do at Clapham South, which is the deep shelter site is somewhere that we've got all to ourselves, and we can kind of manage that site very closely. So we'll be putting Hidden London back into some sort of activity on a relatively experimental basis as soon as possible. And we were delighted to get shortlisted in the Museums and Heritage Awards, actually, for the Hidden London exhibition, which was doing good business for us at the time of closure. Our other kind of major sign of life, really, while being closed, has been the online shop, which has continued to do really well. I guess we've all been online shopping pretty frantically, but we've been trading at something like 50% more than last year, and well up on budget. There was a marvelous moment on a retail shop webinar that I attended where the man from John Lewis said they couldn't sell sofas online, and we were able to say, well, actually, we just sold 3 leopard skin print sofas in the last month. So we're up with the best on online performance. Just thinking about the future as ever, we have got lines for Christmas ready to go. More importantly, we've done a big revamp of the online shop, in particular the kind of platform behind the pictures, which drives it all, and that was launched last week, and we'll see how that performs. But generally, the facility of it is pretty good. We have got some LTM facial coverings to come, but not quite yet. It's been important for us to demonstrate to funders like the Arts Council that some activities have continued. So we have kept on our young freelancers and the documentary curators just to record what's going on transport during these extraordinary times. And I guess in the future we will look back on this period as in a bit the same way that our parents look back on the war. It was most extraordinary interruption to London life, and we'll have a good record of that. And we have been talking to the Museum of London, who've done a much more comprehensive programme of London during COVID-19. We've maintained during lockdown our development team, and I think there's kind of two main strands in that, really. One is to continue fundraising, and we were delighted to secure sponsorship deals from Global and Cubic very early during the lockdown. The Global sponsorship is our biggest single sponsorship, which sponsors the gallery and what will become the National Poster Museum in due course. We've done a lot of work with our, what you might describe as friend raising rather than fundraising. So we felt it was really important to stay in touch with people. I've been ringing around corporate members, members of the patrons circle. We've kind of gone digital in our comms generally with both those groups. We've continued to use the patron circle as kind of guinea pigs for new programming, and the corporate members have benefited from interchange online. We were unsuccessful with our application to the Arts Council, but we've got Heritage Lottery funding for this week, and we'll be going again at the arts at that 1.57 million, and now 1.57 billion that was announced by the government a few weeks ago, once we know how they're going to divvy it up. And then we just, I guess within the last month or 6 weeks, we really have begun to sort of do an intense series of planning for what we described as recovery. And I'm quite keen really to use the word recovery rather than reopen, because I don't think we are reopening. We're not. This isn't a kind of VE day scenario when suddenly everything is open again and we'll dance around the streets. Quite the reverse. So we've done a lot of work with TfL in securing funding from them. So we've got up to 1.3 million for the first half of this year, and we're in negotiation for the second half, and that's, as ever, contingent on TfL getting a satisfactory settlement from government, and that continues to be quite an exciting series of negotiations, got quite political. And then we've just started to work through all sorts of models for restarting some of our key activities, and some of that, as in the photographs at the bottom here, have involved having rather strange distance meetings in a very empty Covent Garden. It has a phenomenally clean floor. Glenn and the team have taken 10 years worth of floor polish off the floor. It looks brand new. And we've done some work out at Acton as well. So if we turn to kind of what recovery might look like, what we had in agreement from the board 2 weeks ago was that we will do an experimental route to recovery 3 months that we've planned and costed, August, September, and October. We'll learn from that in terms of planning what we might do over the Christmas period, and into what everyone describes certainly as the new normal, whatever that is, for the period in the new year 2021 onwards. A number of things really have shaped the way we've thought about this stage. Obviously, the sort of safety of our staff, our visitors, our volunteers, everyone associated with us. That has to be our paramount concern. So we've put a lot of that into the operating plans. We were pretty clear that this had to be a financially savvy restart. We were really warned off starting too soon, maybe walking into a renewed lockdown, and there isn't much business to be had in the West End this week or next week. So we've kind of had one eye very much on that, and not in effect adding to our enormous debts that we've had by losing 80% of our income during the course of the first 5 months of the year. We've also taken the opportunity to think about these plans in a slightly innovative and sort of playful way. We're trying a few things that we've wanted to do for some time, and I'll come to those in a moment, as well as trying to be as entrepreneurial as possible. We're quite clear, for example, that there are two kind of opportunities, given that there are no foreign tourists in London and not likely to be for a couple of seasons, that our key target audiences are families with young children, always been important to us. All the customer sentiment research out there suggests that many of them are dead keen to get out of the house and re-engage with things that stimulate the children and exhaust them by the end of the day. And then there's also the kind of the young adult audience, which I think statistically is less prone to get the disease anyway, who I think are inclined to think they're immune, and are kind of keen to get out and kind of re-engage with whatever we have to offer. So that's a feature. And then I guess the other two things are just keep it dead simple. We don't want to overcomplicate what we're trying to do. And we have got to kind of pace ourselves as well, because the The team is quite small. It's for most of the last few months, it's been the senior leadership team plus a few others doing pretty much all this. We've tracked what's going on elsewhere in European transport museums. We've been on regular calls with colleagues in Europe, as well as those who have already reopened, gardens, country houses, open spaces, and so forth in the UK. We've looked at the research. It all talks about the welcome being really, really important. That people want reassurance. They want reassurance kind of before they actually decide to make the trip, what the experience is going to be like. They also don't want a kind of cut down version of much loved institutions like ours. They want to kind of get as much of it as possible. So that reopening has to be has to clearly be safe and to give people a lot of assurance, but it's also going to be our personality. Nobody wants a kind of sanitized London Transport Museum. They want a sanitized visitor experience, but they don't want all the character taken away from it. So this will not feel like a kind of police state hospital when you approach it. So what does that result in? Well, it results in opening at Acton from the 19th of August for 2 5-day mini seasons, a very much family orientated summer experience. As everything these days, online booking, time tickets, very limited capacity, one-way system, but with some outdoors, some indoors, and the miniature railway volunteers are going to be operating for those 10 days. This is something we want to do for a little while. We've been talking about doing a kind of Acton summer camp for a while. This plays nicely into the notion of local, which is a very strong marketing message from London and Partners and TfL at the moment. People can get there without necessarily using public transport, but there is space in the off-peak period on the network to do that at the moment. And we'll learn from that. And if it goes well, we might well open weekends into September and October, because a lot of the normal activity that takes place in the depot won't be taking place much in this calendar year. And then we'll follow that with opening the museum on the 7th of September. Museum and shop will open on the same day. Again, a kind of one-way route with a take-home craft pack for children aged 5 to 11. We're going to extend the opening hours from 11 till 7, just to take people outside the peaks. So if they're concerned about using public transport, during the peaks, that's catered for. And then every Thursday for that period, we're going to close the museum at 6 and reopen again at 6:30 for a fairly cut down version of some of the lates that we've done there before. And we think, again, that's a bit like the Acton experience. That feels quite experimental. We're going to kind of try things, learn from it, see whether anyone comes, and incorporate that into our thinking for the medium term future. And then Hidden London, it's terribly important for us to get that back up and running, but we're not going to be doing guided tours of tight underground spaces until some way into next year, I think. So as I said, we're going to have a go at reworking the tours at Clapham, a Covent Garden walking tour, and putting virtual tours of places that actually you would never get to on a guided basis, like King William Street, Brompton Road, and some others online. And we've already tested out those tours with our patrons. So those are the kind of 4 elements of reopening. 19th of August at Acton, 7th of September at Covent Garden. Hidden London first 2 tours are actually this week, Thursday, Friday, they're all booked up. And we'll be starting Thursday late from the 10th of September. And now we're just doing all the kind of operational planning, really, to make all that work. We've got the advantage by going a little bit later than many others of kind of learning from other experiences. We're encouraging our staff currently furloughed to kind of go and have a look at their local park or visitor attraction or whatever, to look at the measures in place and to see what works for them and what doesn't, and to bring some of that experience back in to what we do. I think the public transport message is already, as far as TfL is concerned, has already moved from avoid to, travel off peak if you have to, and that message, I think the government will eventually change the message about public transport, but quite clearly the business of mandatory face coverings in closed spaces is probably going to end up applying to us. It certainly applies to the museum shop, so it's going to be a sort of awkward compromise there, people taking masks on and off endlessly. So I think we'll be probably into the business of masks, and we're looking at how that works for our staff members in terms of visors or masks or both or whatever as well. I think it's really important, particularly talking to the friends, our kind of closest supporters, to stress that this is actually this is really recover, not reopen. We're not going back to what we did before in the near future. So big crowded open days at Acton, packed miniature railway are not what we're doing in August. Quite the reverse. The capacity for the 10 days at Acton is the equivalent of one open day on a Saturday. So it's something like 350 people a day over 10 days. So that's the equivalent of one day of one of our open weekends. So it's much thinner, much more kind of linear route through the building. But we're going to use that, learn from it, see what it tells us. And some of that will be outside. The bottom slide here is actually an inflatable building, which we've got 2 of, which we've put up outside the back door of the depot, which will probably give us a bit of extra space. And that's where I think we'll be doing the sort of craft activities for 5 to 11-year-olds as part of that sequence, which will end with a ticketed trip on the miniature railway. So we're incredibly grateful to all the supporters who've stuck with us during this really strange and dire period. I think organisations like ours are genuinely still in peril. We need all the support we can get. Being able to demonstrate we get support is really good in terms of public funding and support. Generally, our commercial sponsors have laudably stuck with us. It's a list of renewals and memberships down at the bottom of the slide there. Patrons have been great and stuck with us. 1 or 2 have paused because their own circumstances aren't good. But actually, we've recruited 1 or 2 extras, and we'll carry on doing that. And I've really appreciated the kind of moral and the financial support that we've had from Barry and the friends. And in time, we'll be back to volunteering. But I think we're saying at the moment that in this 3-month period, we're going to try and rely on our own resources. It unduly complicates things to bring in volunteers at this moment, and all the kind of risks that gives us. And I think we're also very aware that in all the sentiment research at the moment, the people who are most kind of anxious about returning to this type of activity are people in their 50s and above. So we don't want to kind of make an ask of people that's unreasonable. but we will be bringing some volunteers back as soon as Acton is staffed again. At the moment, both Keith and Mike Dupre, I think, come back off furlough for the first time next week to do some of the planning for the depot program. We're talking to the Q-Stock group about some very limited work, 2 or 3 people at a time, and obviously we've talked to the miniature railway volunteers who are going to come back in and man that key part of our family offer at Acton. This week we've launched our public appeal, Help Us Fund Our Future. We soft launched it over the weekend to you guys, to the friends and to board members. When I looked this morning, it stood at just over £10,000 with gift aid, which is great. So much appreciated. We do continue to hemorrhage cash. We're going to lose something in the region of 3.5 million during the course of this year from visitor-derived income. The museum costs £25,000 a day to open, and our landlords, Capital and Counties, having discounted the rents for just about every other commercial operator in Covent Garden, have not deemed it necessary to help us. So we're still paying £74,000 a month rent at the moment. So if you have donated already, thank you very much. It's much appreciated. And that the appeal, I think, goes public. I think it went public actually yesterday, didn't it? Yeah, yesterday too. And we'll see. We've got big mailing lists for Hidden London, for the shop, for museum activities. 70,000-80,000 on a couple of those, and it will be very interesting to see how that works. Our plan is to accelerate a membership scheme for the museum to sort of try and back some of those one-time donors into, I mean, we regard the Friends in a sense as our kind of transport enthusiast members. We'll be looking to kind of provide a bit of a bridge between that and a more family-orientated membership, with benefits being in sort of access to digital content and patron-style events and so forth. And Wes and the team are just working that up at the moment. So the top picture on the slide there is the museum at the moment, which is empty and extremely clean. The bottom one was taken actually 10 days ago. There was the landlords and the restaurants have put a lot of kind of outside tables and so forth up in Covent Garden to try and hurry business along a bit. It has to be said, when you walk 50 yards around the corner, you still walk into pretty much a ghost town. The West End is very quiet, and there's quite a lot of concern amongst central London organisations and venues about the return. So I'm quite glad we didn't open in July or August. I think there may be some visitors around to meet quite modest income targets for September. We're looking at something like 40% of normal visitor numbers. And the budget we put to our board a couple of weeks ago said that by doing what I've just outlined to you over the 3 months, will earn us something in the region of £250,000 more than staying closed and just sitting on the furloughing income. So it's not particularly risky, but of course, until we're there and we're open and beginning to see how things go, it's really hard to see how that will actually play out. And this is inevitably pretty long term now. We're not going to be back to normal in the near future, and the museum will have to think really hard about what it does to realise its charitable purpose into 2021, 22, what it does and what it doesn't do as well. So this is the last slide. So you might describe us being in recovery position, not reopening. Stage 1 is very much kind of experimental route back. We've got the furloughing lifeline will carry on till the end of October. At the moment, there's only 40% of paid staff, permanent contract staff at work. So many of our non-permanent labour staff have been laid off from the end of this month, because as a charity we are unable to pay staff for whom we have no work or no prospect of work. Not all, but most. And we're just kind of planning now for this stage of the new world with those dates. So it's very much about realigning, not reopening, experimenting, being quite agile, and learning and adapting as we go. So that's where we are. It's exciting to be in this position at last. It's been a very odd 4 or 5 months, at times exhilarating, times extremely draining on the team still here. And it's been very encouraging to have a very supportive board at this moment in time. TfL, despite their own travails with the DFT, their body language has been great, and I think will be supportive when they can be in the future. So thank you, Barry, and back to you, and happy to answer any questions that may be in the room.
Okay, thank you very much, Sam. I'll kick off, if I may, because there's one issue which has been raised with me by a number of friends, and that relates to the TfL plans to redevelop for housing some of the lands at Acton, which in some publications have mentioned that after the first phase, which I think is largely focused on the Bollow Lane grounds, there is a possibility that the depot site at Acton could come within scope. I wonder if you could just give us an update on that.
Yeah, sure. We're trying just to understand a little more about it at the moment. It's very much a kind of formal notice that commercial development have issued for this mega development up and down the east side of District and Piccadilly line as it approaches Acton town. I must admit, I thought, and this scheme has been bouncing around for the last couple of years. There is a piece of work yet to be concluded which would cost moving the depot from Acton to some other site. I personally don't think there is another site that has remotely the facility of the location at Acton, and we're exploring that further. At the moment that this scheme was announced, which was almost the same day that the appeal went out, which was particularly unhelpful. At the last board meeting, the trustees had resolved to ask TfL for much greater security of tenure on the Acton site, so that it was possible to invest long-term, both in public programming there, and the Arts Council funds quite a bit of that on that site already, but also to improve the facilities there. Because we've been slightly blighted by both this development, and you'll remember before there was some question about whether the S-stop would be stabled on the site, we'd have to move somewhere else. So one scheme after another seems to have cast lascivious eyes over the depot site, and we're rather hoping to kill this one and get a much longer term tenure at Acton out of it.
Okay, thank you for that, Sam. Now, a couple of my colleagues have flagged with me that they want to ask a question, so I'll call on them first, and then we'll throw it up to anybody else who wishes to contribute. I'll ask Paul London first of all. Paul is our volunteer heritage bus coordinator, and could you ask your question, please, Paul?
Yes, I suppose in a way you've answered some of it, but it was rather disappointing to hear that it appears we won't be able to get onto the Acton site to do anything to the vehicles until after October, which presumably means we can't actually do anything in terms of getting vehicles out until next year, because October is just about the end of the season. The people at London Bus Museum down at Brooklands, they actually open up next weekend. It's an entirely volunteer run operation, and they had asked whether we'd be able to supply a vehicle just for display there, I think, apart from anything else. And beyond that, there were some possibilities during the late autumn and into the winter, in fact. It's rather disappointing, and I think the volunteers themselves will be very disappointed to hear that looks like not being possible. But I would ask whether you could
Thanks, Paul. It's a good question, and it's one of the key characteristics of our museum is that we run stuff, and it's always been my commitment, still is. I don't think we're precluding access to the vehicles between now and October on an extraordinarily kind of limited case-by-case risk assessment basis. I think that's quite possible once we've got through the open period in August. We just haven't got we don't have any staff off furlough to do it at the moment, because by staying on furlough they're keeping the museum afloat, and that's our position. So at the moment, of all the curators, only Matt and half a documentary curator are actually at work. The rest are been furloughed and have been since March. I'd like to think one could to do what you suggest in the not too distant future, but to be honest, it's really hard to look at a future much beyond the 7th of September at the moment.
I think we understand that, but even simple things like dusting and pumping up tyres, and I think particularly the tyres issue is a bad one, because we leave them deflated, we suddenly won't have any tyres. What I would ask is, when you do get to the point of having people available just to be around at Acton when we're around, would you please think about that seriously?
I'm happy to take that request away. Things get a little bit easier with Keith and Mike back next week, so that the depot has actually got members of staff back there again, and we'll pick up your request of the kind of care and maintenance piece on the vehicles, and see what kind of regime we could do for that. And I guess the first question back to you would be, so are people actually willing to come and do that at the moment, despite the risks of doing it in the midst of the epidemic, given that we can mitigate that with social distancing and so forth? That's a key question, I think.
Yes, I did actually have a straw poll with people a little while back, and they were keen to come when it was safe to get in. And following all the rules, whatever rules you want to put in place. But by and large, what we do there is sort of automatically social distance anyway. Go around in a huge group. People do different things in different places, so it does help, I guess.
I don't see why that shouldn't be possible at some point, maybe in September.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
And I guess it's true to say, Sam, that same issue really goes right across the raft of volunteering. That we've all got to try and reignite the enthusiasm of volunteers in whatever they do, for what they haven't been doing for nearly 6 months.
Yeah, that's true, Barry. And I guess we probably need to take the same approach with volunteers as we're doing with the staff who are coming back. We're not only telling them how we propose to make the building safe for them and for visitors, but we're kind of having to sort of re-induct them into the kind of world of work, to sort of re-assimilate them, because it's quite clear that some people have stayed in touch. They've read all the emails and they're dead keen to get back again. Others have had a kind of 5-month party, and sort of everything on the spectrum in between, mentioning no names. So that kind of re-induction process we're putting quite a lot of energy into, actually, because I think how we kind of restart the culture, the work culture, and that applies very much to restarting the volunteer culture, is important. And Sam Clift is not yet. I think he's been back in for a week off furlough during volunteer week to do some work on risk assessment and stuff. And he's. I'm not quite sure when he's scheduled to come back yet.
Oliver Green, who's a member of our trustee board, has a question. At the moment, he's still muted, so will he unmute himself first?
Right, can you hear me now?
I got you, Oliver. Yeah.
Yes, right. Yes, my question was really about looking forward to next summer. As you'll know, it's the 50th anniversary of the end of London Transport Steam next summer, May, I think, when 50 years ago the last of the Panniers pulled out. And I'm just wondering, I'm sure you have thought about this, and I know there are lots of immediate things you have to deal with now, but if there's a prospect of steam operation, and I hope it would be using one of the LT Panniers next summer, I hope some thought has been given to that now, and if so, where you're going to get the Pannier tank from. I mean, there are various of them around. I'm not sure which are available, but I was just really flagging this up as something that I think should be it'll be a popular focus for next summer. It's something that could be done linked with a kind of relaunch of Acton, hopefully in a new form, and perhaps more of a local type of museum. But I just, was wondering where you were at that, or whether you just sort of parked it to one side for the moment. It's just that if a Pannier tank has to be got ready and maybe, done some rebuilding on or whatever for next year, and you've got to get the carriages from somewhere, all of that requires a lot of work. And I hope it's not forgotten about until it's too late to actually organise something for next summer.
No, it's a helpful reminder, actually, Oliver. You're right. I think there are 3 red Panniers currently available.
Well, they have one at Quainton, but I'm not sure what the status of it is at the moment. It hasn't run for some time. Yeah, there are at least a couple of others around, which presumably could be hired for a period, as you've done with Locos before. But I just hadn't heard anything about whether there were any plans for this for next summer. But I mean, it's quite a well-remembered event 50 years ago when the last Pannier ran, and I think it would be a really good thing to promote in quite a big way as next summer's special, if you like.
No, I think I agree with all that. I think it would be great to do. It would have a big impact. To be honest, my planning horizon is September at the moment.
Of course, yeah.
And having an organisation still in business by next year. But we're meeting the new commissioner in a couple of weeks' time. Andy Byford is very heritage prone. I think that's the right way to describe it. He had a visit to the museum kind of high on his list. He's going to come to Acton on day 2, I think, of us opening there, and he's going to be at the front door when we open at Covent Garden on the 7th of September, which is just great to have that kind of endorsement from the new kind of energetic commissioner. And we'll be having a discussion with him about heritage operations, which I think will automatically focus on 38 Tube Stop being out and about on a regular basis, which was our commitment before the epidemic. But you're right, the Red Pannier anniversary is a good one, and we ought to put a little bit of energy into it when we've got Andy back off furlough to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sam.
Sorry.
Yeah. By all means, carry on.
I was just saying, moving on from this question about whether or not there are plans to redevelop at Acton or not, which is a worry. It did just occur to me that, the other possibility, now that Network Rail are members as well, and of course Peter Hendy is linked with the museum too, that the other site that there might possibly be some space at, which would be accessible and is not far from Acton, is to do something on the Old Oak site. I don't know whether that's possible or not, but that's where, of course, the new Crossrail depot is, and it's a very large space, and the whole of the Old Oak Willesden area is a major redevelopment for West London. In many ways, that wouldn't be a bad location for the museum, even if, if the worst came to the worst and the museum actually had to move out of Covent Garden, somewhere over there might be the best place for a new London Transport Museum.
Yeah. Well, our problem is often that opportunities only come our way when in the very early stages of development, because as soon as a site acquires a value, then everyone thinks of a million and one things better than putting the Transport Museum on it. Personally, I'm really against moving from Acton. It took us years to find the site.
Yeah.
It's taken us 20 years to kind of build up what we do there. I can't, I don't really want to spend 2 or 3 years packing it all up, rebuilding somewhere else just to get back to square one, which is kind of how it would feel. Because I can't actually imagine a site being better than Acton in terms of its rail connection, bus stop outside, tube station over the bridge, easy access, etc., etc. And throughout all these discussions about alternative sites, the property people have never come up with anywhere that was remotely interesting. So that's the position that I want to take over that, really. I mean, TfL are committed to finding us another site, but show me the site and I get interested, but I don't think so somehow.
No, it's a long way ahead. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, so it's open house now. Does anybody else have a question?
Ooh.
I will mentally count to 10, if not.
Just one brief one, Barry, if I may, and it's about the point you made early in the presentation, Sam, of when we look back on all this, whenever that glorious day of looking back will be, there will be a story of equal importance to things like perhaps the Second War as a major impact on London and beyond. Is there, I know that there's requests have gone out for retaining any sort of material that might be relevant for the future to an exhibition. Is there more that we need to do individually and collectively on this? And I'm thinking, for example, of the fact that we're in the digital age where, although the museum in the past has benefited from printed information, archives and the like, things are so much easier to discard these days at the touch of a button. I just wonder if there's more that needs doing there. You see the outputs of some of this stuff at stations with regular updates on the position for travellers, guidance, stations reopening and the like. But within 6 months, a lot of the hard copy stuff will have gone. And I just wonder if there's more that needs doing about the COVID era, if that's the way to put it.
No, you're right. I think it's a really, it will be looked back on, I'm sure, as a really kind of watershed period. We've got these two documentary curators, Ellie Miles and Rosamund West, at work collecting the epidemic through kind of diaries and the usual kind of materials. That documentary curator strand of work, which the Arts Council funds for us. So I think that's good. That's a good piece of work. I'm actually keeping my own diary. I have done since January of this year, which has now become very much kind of COVID diary. And I'm lucky enough to sit in on the commissioners' meetings and so forth. And it's been very interesting to look at it. I was in the process of writing up TfL's 20 years when this came along to kind of pull the rug out from under a lot of the achievements of those 20 years. So that's been a very interesting perspective to have in terms of the interviews I've been doing for that process, and we'll come back to that. I'm sure. The intention is still to write the 2020 book. I had imagined that there'd be 2 chapters in it, which provided a kind of litmus test for the progress of Public Transport Authority in London. One was clearly 7/7 and the organisation's response to that. And the other was the Olympic Games in 2012. I think there now has to be a third, which says, and so COVID-19, what did this expose about the nature of the organisation and its place in London? That will happen, I think, into the future.
Okay, thank you, Sam, very much. Has anybody else got any questions? Yes.
Yeah, Barry, can I just make an addition to that request about recording what's going on now? I don't know how easy it'd be to do this, but one thing that strikes me is that in the 20 years of TFL, what the museum has not been able to do, and it'd be difficult to do this, but it perhaps should be done, is they haven't done any photographic recording really of what's happening in London now. I mean, if you looked in the museum collections and the digitized collections at, you know, what's happened in the last 20 years, there are hardly any images on there. I don't know if they just haven't been taken or they haven't been put on, but I wonder whether there actually is the possibility of setting up some sort of a recording scheme of transport in London today, which might be done on a comparative basis with what's already in the collection from the past. And although TfL has its own photographic unit, they don't work in anything like the way that London Transport used to work in recording what it was doing. And of course now, anyway, it ought to be enlarged to include a lot of what's going on Network Rail within London. So just, you know, London today, from a transport perspective, is a huge area which no doubt various people are recording independently, but is not being done by the museum. And that might be a better thing to do and an easier thing to do than trying to record London today in bits and pieces and collections. I mean, you can't keep collecting buses and trains, but you can keep up and maintain high quality photographs of, and video as well, of what's going on in London on transport. And I think that's something actually the Friends could actually help out on, because we have within the Friends, and Barry's used them a lot in the magazine, there are a lot of photographers who are very good and could do that sort of work on the museum's behalf. It just takes organising, I think.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good point, Oliver. Good suggestion. I mean, I think it would be worth my while pointing the documentary curators at the Friends in terms of the Friends' own kind of, because I know they've been getting people to do kind of staff diaries and so forth, or blogs during the course of the epidemic. There was a lot of interest in their response to Black Lives Matter, of course, as well, and that whole month or so. But the kind of collaborative photographic idea, I think, is one that would be well worth pursuing, and which the Friends could provide a frame for. I think that's a good idea. I'll take that one away as well.
Okay.
Okay. Third attempt. Any final questions? If not, can I just end then by thanking Sam very much for a very informative presentation. I mean, it seems to me an incredible amount of work and thought has gone into the plans for recovery. And I'm sure we all wish you every success, Sam, in moving on to that somewhat more positive path than the previous months have been for us. Can I underline to anyone who is watching this on YouTube later, or indeed to my colleagues who are here with me now, that appeal is still open. I think you go onto the museum's web pages, www.ltmuseum.co.uk, and if you go further to /support-us, you should find a very easy donate button to press to help support the appeal. And when we do the YouTube recording, hopefully we might be able to flag that up as a flash at the bottom of the screen. But thank you very much, Sam, for that presentation. Thank you to my colleagues for those questions. And I say we wish you all speed in delivering those plans that you've outlined to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barry. The Friends support has been sterling over the years and over the last few months as well. It's great to have the magazine out there. It's another kind of sign of life for the museum. The magazine gets bigger and better, and the work that you guys put into that and everything else you do is very much appreciated. And we are looking to get back into activity, and inevitably the Friends and the volunteers who come from within the Friends are a really important part of what we do. They have been in the past, and I know they will be again at some point in the future. So thanks a lot to all of you.